met Sandy when I first moved to Burlington in 1971, and I didn't know anybody. I had a young daughter who was the same age as Sandy's two daughters, and someone had given me her phone number and said, "Call Sandy when you get to Burlington." And I did, and she said, "Oh, come on over." And that was the beginning of decades of rabble-rousing together. Yeah, she was a force of nature, and she will be missed. Yeah.
I was her friend, and we taught together at Burlington College. She was my lawyer, like many people probably in this room, and we started a study abroad program for Burlington College in Cuba together. So we were just friends for a long time, and I really miss her.
My name is Barry Cade. I met Sandy about 30 years ago or so, around 1988. I was her first successful trained attorney. In Vermont, you can become an attorney by reading for the bar. And the one thing I really learned from her was how to run a profitable law practice. People who know her will get that.
In '83, and I remember just coming upon Sandy and her powerhouse ways as a student at UVM, and then I transferred to Burlington College, and I took some classes with her, history of the '60s and some other classes, and she was just so great at stirring up conflict and different opinions and getting us all engaged in those conversations, and she really just felt like an incredible role model in my life for just really being a genuine person and standing up for what's right, standing up for the underdog.
I mean, I think every breath she breathed was for her family and her community. Just an incredible role model, an incredible kind of landmark in our community. It's a shock that she's gone.
It's a shock.
I first met Sandy at the hospital. After my mom got into a car accident, they referred Sandy to help with like the process for receiving disability and just to see how she was doing. So that's how I first met her. And then afterwards we kept in touch, and then I would see her here and there. And then one time, me and my mom, we were in the parking lot next to the building where she works at AALV, and she was like, "Where have you guys been? Long time. You guys come in my office. Let's sit down. Let's chat." And then, behold, and you know it, she asked me she asked me if I can be her assistant at her legal office. And so, yeah, I became her paralegal assistant, and that's how I got to know her even better through her mentorship. And she was really good. She was like, I'm really happy to have gotten a chance to work alongside her, get to know her. She's very friendly, very funny, has a strong personality, but she means very well, and she's done a lot of work in the community. I'm really glad that I got a chance to know her, even if it was last year only, but I'm really glad and grateful. Yeah.
Sandy was wonderful. I knew her for many years through primarily Roz at first. Roz Payne, her good friend. Did you know them? No? And my God, she helped so many people. She was part of so many things. I saw her everywhere I went, basically.
I came to Vermont in 1971. And Sandy and I worked together on founding the Vermont Women's Health Center. And Sandy and I, along with Mark, were part of a collective that created a community newspaper called the North Country Star. And that was in the mid-'70s. And Sandy and I we were comrades and friends over the years. I left Burlington in 1979, but I visited often over the years, and we collaborated on a few things, but it was mostly having that connection with someone that I could say was like a mentor to me, even though we were colleagues. I really loved Sandy. The last couple of years ago, I visited Burlington, and we talked about going to Cuba together, but that trip didn't happen. But I know she took many trips to Cuba, and we had planned to, somehow she had planned for me to go with her on one of the trips, but it never came to be. I miss her, and I really loved Sandy. And when her children were small, early in the 70s, I spent a lot of time with them and the kids.
I last saw Sandy probably a week and a half before she died. I was walking on the street. We were exiting the same location, and I stopped her cold. I said, Sandy, Sandy. And she turned around and looked at me, and she waited, and I walked over to her, and I said, I haven't seen you in a while, and I just want to thank you for what you've been doing. Because if somebody doesn't thank you, I need to thank you enough. She said, thank you, Mark, thank you. And we just talked for a little bit. But the way I know her, I arrived in Burlington in 1973, in the fall of 73. And by the fall of 74, we were involved. I met her through the creation of a community newspaper called the North Country Star. And the North Country Star was a independent kind of socialist rag that we put together that dealt with the news all around Chittenden County. We selected stuff that we wanted to publish. It was a monthly. It was printed in too small print. You could hardly read it, but we were dedicated and a little ignorant. And Sandy was really one of the guiding lights for the direction of our work. And I just learned so much from her. There were so many things, whether it was the North Country Star, or I started the Vermont Caribbean Education Association and brought people to Cuba. And she was in one of the early groups. And I just, I admired who she was, you know, as an attorney who never stopped fighting for the things she believed in. So when I heard that she died, I was sort of like that, you know. Not we all have to die, you know, but it was, wow, you know, somebody else who has an amazing contribution is passing. So just wanted to share that.
Well, Sandy and I met in 1969. She was married to Grant at the time, and my husband and I moved from Madison, Wisconsin. He was a newly hired professor at UVM, and so that's where our association began, and we were attracted to each other in terms of our political leanings, and collaborated on a lot of things over the years. We had a television show together for about 20 years, from before Channel 17. It was on I forget the name of the channel, but there was another channel, and then we had a show on Channel 17 for a while. Anyway, we're just I just felt like a long time we were just pals, you know. We spent every Friday night together. We'd have dinner together with Bee Bookchin and a couple of other people to discuss the world, and you know, I loved her. What could I say? She was my buddy. She drove me crazy, but we loved each other.
Sandy is a member of Vermonters for Justice in Palestine. As a member, active member, she helped us a lot. I mean, she has unbelievable intensity and dedication to the question of Palestine. For us, maybe she left, but she didn't leave, because when we send email to each other, every day we receive emails. Her name is the first name, you know, so her memory is with us every day. Two, because of the last 2 months and the question of the First Amendment rights and the freedom of speech, which is her specialty. It's, you know, it's dear to her heart. I remember her every day. As a matter of fact, I'm a little angry that she left earlier when we need her the most.
That's it. Well, is there anything else you would want to say about her? Is there anything else you would want to say about her?
She will never be forgotten.
Well, I know Sandy for a long time through politics. We collaborated on a number of issues over the years. One had to do with a YMCA project downtown. There was a bus project. A couple projects we opposed. We came from different political perspectives.
Yes.
I was more on the right center, Sandy on the left center, but we found things that we agreed on and worked together on them. And sometimes we had really significant differences, but I always loved Sandy. And when I got the word that Sandy had passed away, it really floored me. And I'm really still floored by it, just the idea that Burlington is not going to have Sandy Baird around anymore. She was such an incredible advocate for the issues that she cared about. She worked so hard, tirelessly her whole life. And even though she was 84 years old, it seemed to me that she never aged. She always had the passion and energy. And the idea that Sandy wasn't going to be around anymore, or that I wasn't going to get a call from Sandy saying, what are we going to do about this, whatever the issue might have been at the time that she was calling me about. It's just still hard to sort of get my hands around that Sandy Baird is not going to be out there pushing on the issues that she cared about. So, I mean, there's really nobody quite like her. She was a force of nature.
I knew Sandy from Burlington politics, and I was thinking about Sandy, and I realized that she is very difficult to pin down in terms of her politics. And it's like, you could never really know where Sandy was going to land because she had always her own analysis of things. And it was always very sophisticated. But, you know, it would be, you know, she engaged with all parts of the political spectrum, which was really part of Sandy's strengths. She was interested in how everybody thought, and she kind of like integrated all of it into her own worldview, her own analysis, you know. I worked with her a little bit at Burlington College where she taught, and she was a very revered teacher there. And I teach at UVM, so I really have, you know, wanted to get on the record how much I respect her as a teacher, and I want to express that on behalf of all of her students too.
I met Sandy sometime in the early mid-'80s. Sandy was a member of the Green group party. I was working for the city of Burlington doing some waterfront development on behalf of Mayor Sanders and others, and she was a vocal opponent of the development, and we were supportive, and so we had a whole lot of chats and discussions. But over time, in different perspectives, that was the first time I met her. You know, in different roles, different responsibilities, her work with refugee folks, her work later on as a Democrat in supporting Peter and all of that. So, you know, just a great soldier in the work and all this work that we do, and really kind of unsuspecting. She always said, "Hey, we need to get together to talk about," and there was always something to do, right? So kind of missed that, but that's how I knew her.
I've been part of WILF, and Robin Lloyd has invited me to a number of the events, and Sandy's been there, and Sandy would always say something that was shocking and weird, and I needed to know, and I found that I've come to rely on her wisdom when complicated articles, and I don't know how. I got shamed a lot by Democrats, and that wasn't going well. And when I could get to Sandy and get to the bottom of what I really thought, that I was very grateful. I don't know. I mean, I'm a Democrat, but I wasn't doing well with the party line, let's put it that way. And Sandy had a way of getting underneath an issue's language and if I couldn't figure out why it was worded the way it was, she could tell me why it was worded the way it was.
Well, I've known her from way back, mainly at Burlington College. And then I did a few pieces with her on this show, CCTV, which you know of. And she was always wanting to be on top of the events happening in the world and letting everyone know about it. And it was kind of exciting to be around her. Of course, her comment was, she said she's going to keep going till she croaks. And there she went and croaked without giving us any warning. And we're all here today remembering her, but feeling mad at her that she croaked a bit too early.
First met her when I was doing a case against my child's father. She was helping him with the court system. And then again, I know she was doing a legal clinic at the Kemp Center, and then a couple of other things, but she lived in the community. She knew my mom. So just kind of that way.
Around.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say about it?
She will definitely be missed. I hope there are people that can fill half her shoes.
So happy to be here to celebrate a life of someone I knew so dearly. Yeah.
Speaking of her.
I'm better today because when it happened, I was very shocked because I'd seen her the previous Friday, and come Monday, I got the news that she was gone. And it took me a while to come to where I am.
It must be hard, I guess. Speaking of which, how did you know her?
She worked as an advocate she worked pro bono for victims of violence, and she was very passionate about seeking justice for many of them that come through the Association of Africans Living in Vermont are war survivors. And they've never known justice because they've lived in war-torn countries. And so most of the clients that came through were women who are just starting to understand about being in a new environment, and that there were systems in place to advocate for them when they were victims. And so she didn't charge them. She never lost any case. And so when they learned that she had died, they mourned for her. And I was very sad that I was the one that had to tell them. And so there's really a gap because there's no one now who advocates for them. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to leave behind? Is there anything you'd like to leave behind for her family? Like a message or something you just want to say?
Yes. Sandy was special. It was an honor to know her, and I'll be very sorry not to see her walking the hallways of AALV. And I'm very sorry that I didn't get to go to Cuba with her. We had planned many times, but somehow this last time was the one time that we would have gone together. So maybe one day I'll go to Cuba and I'll think of her. But I'm so inspired by her and what she did for the community.
We knew Sandy for almost 46 years since we moved to this area. My wife Chris and I, 47 years ago. We met her the first year, and we have been friends ever since. We had dinners, monthly dinner with a group of friends. Every month we would meet with Sandy and this group of friends and discuss politics and everything under the sun, including arguments sometimes, but beautiful arguments, and we loved every minute of it. And she passed away, unfortunately. I don't think we missed in 35 years any of the dinners. That dinner that night, Sunday night, when she passed, she called in and she said, I'm not able to make it, and she passed a couple hours later. So she was supposed to be at the dinner, and it's sad. But, you know, she was a woman of all seasons, I call it. You know, especially dedicated her life to helping disadvantaged women with kids, and locally and abroad. You know, she was really, that was her main issue, is to help everybody around, and especially women and kids.
I knew Sandy for a long, long time, early on in politics. Her daughter Rosie and I worked together at Nectar's for years, so we had that touch. And Sandy was, what you saw is what you got with Sandy Baird. She was intimidated by no one. She just had a north compass point that she was true to, and she was just fearless and tireless, and she would always engage you. I was still getting emails from her, you know, every once in a while, one come across my email chatter, and she was just the real deal. I mean, just one of the coolest, lousy term, but one of the hippest people I've ever known. She was just comfortable with herself, would not allow anybody to be trampled. You know, she wasn't concerned about how popular something was. She would do what she felt was right. And we are thankful to have someone like her around. So we're lucky.
Do you want to leave like a lasting message, or just something that you want to say to her or family?
Sandy was an inspiration to anyone, especially in this country when right now times are kind of difficult with the current administration, to stand up for what is right, stand up for people who are being abused by the current administration, and just trust your gut and go with your instinct. And Sandy was just a real inspirational person for so many. Good rule to live by. So thank you.
Well, I met Sandy before she was a legislator. I knew her when she was married to Grant. And so when they separated, I got to know Grant, and we got Sandy, but Sandy and I got to be friends. And then she was part of a women's counseling collective or something like that, and she asked me if because I was the only out gay man who also did psychotherapy. So she invited me to do that because men kept calling. And then eventually, and I got to be friends, but then I was a legislator, and so Sandy and I both served on the the House Judiciary Committee. And so our relationship has many, many twists and turns. But I loved Sandy. And I was heartbroken.
I knew Sandy mostly from when she was in the legislature, although I knew her before that. And she was on the Rules Committee. And in my job, I had to take a lot of regulations and rules there for approval. She was always so fair and welcoming, and she just did a great job. She's a great person.
Oh my goodness. So I was lucky enough. I was a student at the University of Vermont. I came up here from southeastern Massachusetts, and I grew up in a civil rights family. So I came here in 1972 to be a student, and 1974 we started Women Against Rape and all kinds of stuff. Free self-defense class. We turned Burlington upside down. And I was lucky because I was a baby. I was 20, 21 years old. But there were so many wonderful feminists, straight and lesbian, who were there, and there weren't that many of us, so we all knew each other. Sandy was part of that group. She was one of the straight part of that group. A little bit older than me, so I could look up to her, but she was a lawyer. I mean, really, right? So she could bring the knowledge and the protection of the law. So I knew her through feminist organizing for many years. At one point, though, a fun story, I was so overwhelmed that I still owed $1,500 from my UVM loan. It cost about $3,200 a year then. and I still owed $1,500, and I was like so freaked out. And I didn't know any lawyers. I called Sandy. I need to file for bankruptcy. Obviously, she did not let me do that.
I got to know her early on. She was very active in Burlington politics. And then after her daughter was killed, she started this incredible program, which I was a very big fan of. So I admired Sandy Baird a lot. She was somebody who stuck up for her principles. She was smart as hell, and she was a lot of fun because she didn't mind saying what had to be said.
In that case, what would you want to leave? Would you want to leave like a lasting message behind for her family, or just a final thought?
Yeah, we're going to miss Sandy. She was really an idol in some ways of not just the progressive people, but anybody who stood up for what they believed in, no matter what the price was. Sandy Baird was an incredible example of that. Thanks.
I met Sandy many years ago, particularly around the Cuba program. She had started this program called the Cuban American Friendship Society, and had started planning trips to Cuba with Burlington College. And this was probably early in the 2000s, and that's when I had met her before, but that's when I really started to get to know her. And then we partnered for probably 2 or 3 dozen trips to Havana, to Cuba with her. So our experience goes way back, and again, her love for Cuba, her dedication to improve the relations between the U.S. and Cuba were really heartfelt, and she lived it. She went to Cuba, she provided money for programs, she brought supplies, so she was quite the person, and that's my relationship with Sandy.
Well, do you want to leave a lasting message for her family, or just a final thought about it?
Well, you know, I love Sandy, and I saw her all the time, and really miss her terribly, and I know they do too. Yeah, thank you so much.
Hello everybody, my name is Nathan. I'm Sandy's grandson. This is my Grandpa Grant right here. We're all here today to celebrate Sandy, or as I called her, G-Ma. So I thank you all for being here. I want to thank Terry Renee for doing the bagpipes and the awesome music with that. We're going to have a few songs that he's going to play at the end of everything that Grandma wanted for her service. We chose this day because it's International Labor Day, which was her favorite holiday. So that's why we're here. And then also we chose this location because, well, first we host the Caroline Fund here every year, and Grandma always loved it at the St. John's Club, so we thank them for having us. I'm going to introduce the speakers that we have here. We have a pretty good list going on, so as they end, I'll be introducing the next one. We're going to start with Grandpa here, and then right after Grandpa, Bonnie, my grandma's sister, Bonnie Baird, she's going to come up and say a few words. So thank you guys for being here. Also, we're not really doing an open mic situation here. We just kind of have a list of speakers. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you all for being here. Sandy loved nothing more than a gathering of people, a political meeting, a party, a cabal, anything for people to get together and be with one another. So this turnout is very, very pleasing. You should be thrilled. I want to tell you a little bit about the Sandy Baird that I knew. We were both 18 years old when we met. We were students at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and the relationship kind of went on from there. We ended up by coincidence in Madison, Wisconsin, and we went over the course of our lives. We went on to create a complex and rich and deep relationship that had many, many facets to it. And this relationship lasted really all of Sandy's adult life, and mine too, up until now. We were friends, acquaintances, then we were going out, then we were engaged, then we were married, then we sort of went to war for a while and we got divorced. We salvaged our friendship out of that. We became really true friends, travel buddies, movie buddies, and companions who could and did talk about almost anything. I've indeed lost a best friend. Sandy was a person that I'm sure you know loved to discuss and debate. This was her thing in life, and her favorite focus was politics and history. Those are her passions. But most any topic came into her purview within that framework. But I always saw her also as kind of a Renaissance woman. She could delve in all kinds of activities and theories and ideas, and also apply a lot of different kinds of activities in her life, and did so throughout it. Just a very brief example, in high school, she went to the Springfield Classical High School in Springfield, Massachusetts. That was an excellent high school, so sort of along the line of Boston Latin and Boston. She got honor roll grades there. She played basketball. She was a cheerleader. She had enough. A lot of people are surprised by that one or not. I don't know which. She sort of turned into a political cheerleader for the rest of her life. She always made honor roll, and all the time holding an after-school job in a diner. She loved all kinds of things. There was just sort of no end of the different kinds of things that she would get enthused about or like. Popular music were a big one. Soul music, she really knew soul music a whole lot. Broadway musicals also, some people were shocked to hear that she liked Broadway musicals. She fell in love with Cuba and the people and the culture of Cuba. She went to a movie just about every week. And if you know Sandy, you probably heard about Springfield, Massachusetts. She was very proud of Springfield. Always missed Springfield. Always wished that she could sort of live back in Springfield, I think, really. And talked about it all the time. Took friends to visit. And speaking of travel, she took a major trip every year. She loved to travel. Always found a way to take 1 or 2 or 3 major trips. She was the lawyer that she was. She could always come up with a complex and knowledge-based argument about any argument at all. She would probably win it. You better not be on the wrong side. She had quirks, of course, also. She had a superstitious side that a lot of people didn't know about, but she did have that. And another example is a strange quirk she had was that she had this fantastic memory for phone numbers. Phone numbers. What's so-and-so's phone number? She'd rattle it off like that. I mean, just like a thick phone book worth of that stuff. And she herself didn't really know how she could remember it. In later years, Sandy was concerned to create a legacy during the time she had left. She was incredibly tenacious. I'm sure you're not surprised by that either. She, for example, studied independently for the bar and passed the bar and became an attorney without going to law school, which you can do in Vermont. She prepared a complex trial just this December, which took its toll on her, I think, but which she won. So she was just at it until the very end, I know. And that was a just cause by that trial. She twice won races for the Vermont House of Representatives. So she had such a varied life. She did indeed create a legacy, among which elements were the work of the Caroline Fund, which was founded in 1998 when our Caroline was killed. It was her idea to set up the fund. She helped in founding the Cuban American Friendship Society, the Women's Health Center, and lots of others. There are too many really to cite a list or examples. She had a list of projects and committees, campaigns, task forces, ad hoc gatherings, study groups that she would start up, and people would go, and she would talk about all kinds of things with them, just for the fun of and the interest of and the rewards of talking about all kinds of different things and taking various kinds of action, including especially political action. These groups that she did and all these activities that she founded and did left their mark on our lives in Burlington for the positive side. A dream that she was working on at the very end when she died was the creation of a new kind of law school that would have been a collective and affordable law school. Sandy was talked and thought about things literally up until almost the hour that she died. That very evening she was still making soup and talking about things. Many of Sandy's activities and beliefs were based on a deep sense of empathy with others, and she had a almost out of control sense of empathy with others. And she had an insistence on truth, justice, and fairness, and these were principles that governed just about everything she did, from interpersonal relationships to her political activities. They permeated her life and her relationships. That's sort of why, really, her legal practice always centered on people who couldn't afford legal help. She was determined to try to help them to the extent that she could, even if they didn't have a big fortune to pay a big fee. Such principles also explain much of her politics, but also other areas of her life. A minor example is her cats and dogs. She always had a cat or a dog or both, and they always were rescue cases. So Sandy has left us physically, I know. But she remains unforgettable. She really was a character in the best way possible. She wanted to change the world for the better, and she did. She truly lived a life well lived. Thank you.
So to follow up Grandpa over here, we're gonna have Bonnie, if you could come forward. Bonnie Baird, my grandma's sister. Have you say a few words for us?
Yeah. Hello everyone. I just have a poem and a couple of comments. Do not stand at my grave and weep. Do not stand at my grave and forever weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awake in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and forever cry. I am not there, I did not die. And I have to say, I miss my email debates with Sandy. But I don't believe that she's sleeping, and I don't believe that she died, because wherever she is, she's stirring up good trouble.
Thank you, Bonnie. So our next two speakers, we're going to have Jeffrey Quittner. If you would please come up and say a couple words. And then following him, we're going to have Anna Blackmer come up and say a couple words. So, Jeffrey, if you could come up.
There he is.
When Grant first asked me to speak, he said it should be 3 to 5 minutes. But having known Sandy for 51 years and worked with her both at Legal Aid and Burlington College, it's hard to encapsulate all our times together in 5 minutes. So I may go over it a little bit, but I'll try not to. So, ordinarily I wouldn't make notes for something like this, but at 78, I don't want to remember what I forgot to say. I'll lose sleep over it. So, my notes. As you can see, it's a game. Jeez, I wish my kids were here. They could help out. Anyway, I met Sandy when I first started working at Legal Aid in 1974, a few years ago. And I was hired as a staff attorney by John Dooley. And I was assigned to work with Sandy in the domestic relations unit that we had. Sandy exclusively worked in that unit. And I got to know Sandy pretty well, and after observing her, the way she approached clients and the rapport that she developed, as well as her dedication, I was really impressed, very impressed. She was a paralegal. And all the while, she was accumulating days so she could sit for the bar exam. Vermont is one of those very unique states, maybe the last one, to allow you, if you have a college degree, to work under an attorney and sit for the bar and become an attorney. And that's what she did. She persevered, and obviously she had some help from her high IQ, and she made it. She made it as an attorney. Sandy had the work ethic. I hate notes, you know. She had the work ethic second to none. She made it happen. She really was irreplaceable in what she did. And she did a real service for our clients who want nothing more, for the most part, than a divorce so they could start anew. And legal aid was the last resort for that. So Sandy was a role model to all of us who worked at legal aid, and probably to a lot of our clients. And she worked fearlessly as an advocate. She advocated in many of the projects that Grant was talking. That's your name, Grant? Yeah, no. It's old age. She worked tirelessly, and right up until her death, she was working more hours than most of us today work. And she had a level of energy that the Energizer Bunny was jealous of. Judge Amadon once, when we were in court, he once addressed an attorney who was not leaving the state. And he said, "They broke the mold after you." So I want to repeat with all sincerity what Judge Amadon said, but I want to repeat it on behalf of Sandy. They broke the mold after Sandy.
You're here.
Okay, more notes. After I worked with Sandy for 6 years at Legal Aid, and after Legal Aid, we stayed in touch because we were not only colleagues, but we were good friends. I don't know if I ever had a fight with Sandy, and knowing me, I can be sometimes difficult. But we never ever lost touch, and Sandy. We had developed a friendship even at that time where if Sandy had a problem, and I always told her, call me no matter what the time is, day or night. And she said, well, the same for you. And that's the way it developed. When I went to work in the Virgin Islands, and later I was a prosecutor, and later I lived in the Dominican Republic, but we still, even at the distance, we still kept in touch by telephone on a regular basis. And when I came back to Burlington, I was kind of taking care of my father. She said, well, why don't you come to work for Burlington College? And I said, okay, and I taught a couple courses there, and there were a couple seminars. We had a good time, and Sandy did a real service for that. She was Burlington College. She was Burlington College. And she had a real soft spot in her heart, especially she was somewhat taken back when Burlington College ceased to exist. And whose is that? Okay. Won't be long now. Is there an attorney that could help me with this? You know, I say to myself nowadays, you know, everything you rely on the computer, and I decided, you know, everything's you have to do online, and so I decided that I don't want to go to court anymore because I can't, you know, manipulate the computer. So, okay. Just bear with me. This, I want to say it's embarrassing, but it isn't. When it comes to Sandy, you got to be patient with me, and I don't want to miss anything. Okay, last page. Friendship. When I was working in the Virgin Islands, I had a need for an attorney to file an eviction action because a tenant was taking advantage of me. And I was talking to Sandy. Sandy said, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll get him out. Not a problem. And getting a tenant out in Burlington is a problem. But she said, I'll do it. No matter how long it takes, I'll get him out. And get him out, she did. She did get him out. And I was very, very, very grateful for that. And as a friend, I was only too happy to assist her when she asked for some help with that very contentious case that she was working on prior to her death. The case involved, and I can't understate how complicated it was. It involved international law and the legitimacy of public documents that were made in another country, as well as apostilles. I don't know if anybody knows, but they both had to be challenged. And when I first looked at it, on its face, it was going to be very, very difficult for the judge not to consider them legitimate. But Sandy wouldn't give up. She said, "We can do this. They're not legitimate, and we're gonna work until we have a solution." And the solution she had, and the judge eventually ruled in her favor. The documents were not legitimate, so they were not allowed into evidence. And that was great. That was great. So she never gave up. I always had a lot of respect for Sandy, but when I was working with her on that case, my respect went through the stratosphere because, of her intelligence and her compassion for her client. She didn't want to say no, and she didn't want to negotiate that case. So she stuck it out, and I stuck it out with her. And I said to her, she called me the Saturday before she passed away. And I'm gonna wrap it up. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. She called the Saturday before she passed away, at least a couple times, and we spoke about some of the issues of the case. And I told her, Sandy, you gotta calm down. Calm down. And that wasn't in her DNA. She wasn't counted down at all. Just a couple other things that are kind of funny. No? All right. I do want to say one thing and show one thing. This I made for Sandy when she was at a 70th birthday. And I gave it to Sandy so she wouldn't forget basically who she was. And she wore it, and I got it back from Rosie, and it was fun. But my last words are this is Sandy. We used to go out on Friday afternoons and sail on the boat, and we had a great time. She enjoyed it. Everybody enjoyed it. And I was Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We appreciate your words. Anna, if you would come up next, we would appreciate it. Project your voice into the mic.
I'm Anna Blackmer. I'm just going to read this because unlike Sandy, I can't just get up and talk for 3 or 4 hours. Since Sandy died, I hear her voice in my head all the time. And really, since I first became friends with her, I've heard that voice remind me to think more deeply, to question authority. Anna, remember you were once an anarchist, and never say thank you to the cops. And above all, to question more than a few of my most cherished beliefs. As a teacher, she had the ability to talk for hours without any notes, and she often couldn't wait to do that. We taught a class together at BC, The City in History, her great class based on Jane Jacobs, which she called in many people from Burlington to talk about Burlington as our city. And I quickly learned I had to be prompt. Often she was already talking, even if I got there 10 minutes early. She was a beloved teacher who encouraged a lot of debate in her classes, always hopeful that there would be at least one libertarian or conservative student who would be willing to argue against leftist sacred cows. She really, really believed in free speech, and in its least adorned and altered form, not just in the classroom. The Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, was sacred to her, even though she understood its history, its flaws, and its limitations. She had a stash of pocket-sized constitutions that she handed out to students, friends, anyone who would take one. I still have my copy, as do other friends, and because of her, I've actually read it. She was the worst driver I've ever known, except for Murray Bookchin. I was her passenger only a couple of times, then avoided it for the rest of her life. But she loved her cars, almost always purchased used from Handy's, and especially that last Mustang. We did spend a lot of time on the road. In the aughts, we went to Montreal a lot, often to Jean Talon Market, so that Sandy could buy Palestinian olive oil. Inspired by her beloved friends, Musa and Chris, she once bought a small olive tree which she smuggled in over the border by hiding it under her skirt. And she must have been wearing a long skirt that day. She was legendary for her sharp dressing and short skirts. The image of Sandy being dragged by her 2 dogs, Charlie and Patsy, along Willard Street on a winter morning in the 90s in a suit and high heels will always stay with me. And though she loved to look sharp, she probably had a court date that day. She was hard-headed about her commitment to clients and the legal system. Her love of swimming was also legendary, and she was fortunate to have a high pain threshold because she would start swimming in the lake in May and only stop in September, sometimes even October. She went every day in the summer, often returning to work with wet hair and sandy clothes, sometimes partway through a meeting. She always said she hated meetings, but I also think she loved to hate them. She always showed up. She usually went to North Beach because it was the people's beach. She loved Misquamicut in Rhode Island, where we vacationed together with our families for 10 years until the pandemic stopped us. She was a minimalist at the beach, though she often took one of the very large history books she brought along. I hardly ever saw her read fiction. The first time I went to Cuba in 2001, we stayed at the Tropicoco, an aging Soviet-style all-inclusive at the Playas del Estes, about half an hour drive from Havana. Sandy would go to the beach every morning, taking some food from the buffet and feed the street dogs, who she believed were all pregnant. Any number of times we'd find her asleep on the sand, surrounded by a ring of adoring and patient dogs. Sandy loved Cuba, and we returned many times as we tried to penetrate the fortified bureaucracies at the university to work with Burlington College to create a study abroad program there, which eventually thrived along with the trips to the island with the Cuban American Friendship Society. She made and kept those friends there and loved almost everything about the place, though she scoffed at the reverential attitude of many of her male contemporaries. Once when we were driving out to Vignales, she said, "How could Fidel even think he could control these people?" In Cuba, people talk about the contradictions, usually with a shrug. Sandy was full of contradictions. She was complicated and was sometimes difficult to be friends. It was sometimes difficult to be friends with her, but she often showed her tender side. She admitted being afraid of many things and some people, only a few. She didn't like doctors, dentists, hospitals, or claustrophobic spaces. She loved the Kennedys and became friends with many Republican legislatures during her time in the State House. She despised Burlington College's narrative evaluations, a cornerstone of progressive education, and constantly lobbied for grades. She knew that her students would need them for law school. She often preferred the company of men, but was one of the most ardent and effective feminists I've ever known. She hated technology, but spent hours on the phone and writing emails. She didn't like marriage or the patriarchy, but she loved her unusual, but still very nuclear family, Grant, Rosie, Nathan, and Caroline, more than anyone or anything. But above all, I believe she loved freedom for herself and for all the people for whom she worked as a lawyer, teacher, and advocate. As one of the many she helped, I'll be indebted to her for the rest of my life, and it's my guess that there are many others who feel as I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for making me cry. Appreciate that. Next up, we have John Franco, and then following his words, we're going to have Peter Clavel. So, John, if you would come up for us.
Oh, dear. Hey, you got the beard.
Oh, no, that's not going to happen. I'm on an antibiotic, but I said, what the hell? To borrow from Grace Flick, you've heard from the heavy groups now. Time for the morning maniac music. I promise to be tastefully inappropriate. I want to talk about the eclecticism of Sandy's life with some snippets of various parts of her life. When I started practicing law, I was a public defender, and Sandy was a deputy state's attorney, along with Norm Blay and Tom Garrett, who I believe are here. One part of our relationship, which I will never forget, was a case that we had of a young woman by the name of Pat LaPlante. Pat was enamored with this police officer by the name of Jose Fernandez, who was apparently very attractive. And what was that old song, Just Like Me, They Want to Be Close to You? Pat had an interesting way of expressing that. She would stand out in front of, I don't know what the name of the restaurant is now, it used to be called Finbar's on the corner of Church and Main Street, and let's say scream out a rather suggestive entreaty to Officer Hernandez, which would result in her arrest for disorderly conduct. And so there was this pattern that went on, and Sandy and I were going, what are we going to do with Pat? If Justice Dooley is here, please cover your ears about what we did. So we had a running plea agreement that said that Sandy would dismiss every other charge, and Pat would plead guilty to every other charge, and that worked out until I think Jose got transferred away, and so the problem resolved itself. At that same time, when I was a public defender, the state's attorney's office started to really ramp up its sexual assault prosecutions. Sandy used to have some interesting parties at 114 Loomis Street, particularly second floor apartment, where she would have a group, the invitees would include lesbian separatists and toxic males, including myself and former Free Press reporter Scott McKay. And one particular night when I was up in the upstairs kitchen, I got cornered by Peggy Lures and another number of other lesbian separatists who were really going after me for defending men that were accused of sexual assault. And I had some really nasty cases. I mean, these things were horrible. And the result of it is I got pinned up against the refrigerator and got beaten up by them. But that was just life at parties at Sandy's house. On a more poignant note about Sandy, what really struck me, I mean, her humility was almost a fault. The previous speaker mentioned Cuba. One of Sandy's favorite spots was the Hotel Nacional. They had an outdoor bar. And I was with her one night, and she started to confess to me that she thought her life was a failure and that she had never done anything. And I was absolutely dumbfounded by that. I mean, it was a combination of I put my arms around her and I supported her, but I also scolded her about, what are you talking about? I said, there's few people in Vermont or anywhere that have done what you've accomplished. Look at what you've accomplished. And yet she felt, I mean, I'm sorry, it's the patriarchy and it's a woman thing and how you're not supposed to value what you do. And I think it was all that stuff that was weighing on her. But I really had to explain to her that she was one of the best examples of a life well led. And my last comment is going to be a combination of Sandy's eclecticism, which will be her spirituality, her Catholicism, and the Ford Mustang. And what do those three have to do together? Any Catholics in the room? Everything! No, I don't know. She got the Ford Mustang after she started going to Mass, or she started going to Mass after she got the Ford Mustang, but it was black hatchback 4 on the floor standard shift. You know, it's like, if she told me about that, she like confessed to me. She said, "You're not going to believe the car I got. I got a black Ford Mustang." You know, and of course, my response was, "Sandy, you should have bought this for yourself 10 years ago." And in terms of her spirituality in the last few years, her spirituality was her whole sense of community. And for what her sister said, I absolutely agree with you. Sandy is there. She's watching us now. And I'll tell you one thing that I know within the marrow of my bones. Sandy will be back. It'll be a different time. It'll be a different place. But her spirit is irrepressible, and she will be back. And Sandy, well, God love you. God love you.
Tough act to follow, Johnny. Yeah, I'm Peter Clavel, and yes, Sandy has left us physically, but as John and others have said, she certainly is with us in spirit, and her legacy of advocating for civil liberties, for fairness, for equity will live on forever in this community. I was also getting a little fearful that people would only have nice things to say about Sandy, and John and Anna, you kind of fixed that, and you gave some insights into the true Sandy. As we know, Sandy was a complicated person. And on one hand, Sandy was tough as nails, and you've heard some of those stories. On the other hand, she was as soft as a marshmallow. And can you imagine anyone, do you know anyone that had a bigger heart and was more generous than Sandy Baird? No, there's nobody. And the complexity of Sandy showed its head in our relationship. I know Sandy in a lot of different ways. but she was often a pain in the ass. In the early 80s, I was CETO director, and I was charged with leading the revitalization of Burlington's waterfront. And Sandy and I had a difference of opinion. And that became very public and very obvious, as she was one of the founders of the Citizens for a Better Waterfront, and I see some of you scallywags are here tonight as well. But it did become a better waterfront, so thank you. I also knew Sandy as a political opponent. I ran for mayor 8 campaigns. My first, one of my most esteemed opponents was Sandy Baird in 1989. But after that election, we're able to acknowledge that, yeah, we may disagree on some things, but let's work together. And we found common ground. And I grew to respect Sandy in ways that I never expected that I would. You know, I saw how Sandy took the death, the killing of her daughter Caroline, and turned that by coming together with friends and family and saying, we are going to honor Caroline by creating a program which is going to help women in difficult situations. And it continues today, 25 years later, more than 25. You know, I saw how Sandy, like many of us, she would disagree. She not only would disagree, she was disgusted with so many aspects of our foreign policy. But rather than just piss and moan, Sandy would say, we're going to do something about relating, connecting with people that we may disagree with. And Sandy, more than 30 years ago, was among the founders of the Burlington Bethlehem Arad Sister City program. And to this day, she would attend every meeting of that program. One of my most memorable trips was traveling to Israel and to Palestine with Sandy Baird. Can you imagine an extended trip to Israel and Palestine with Sandy Baird, Ross Payne, and Joe Bornstein? Yeah. You know, and you look back at, you know, about our feelings with Cuba. And Sandy, so many years ago in the early 80s, had the foresight to create the Cuban-American Friendship Society. I traveled to Cuba with Sandy. But in most recent years, I worked with Sandy on her efforts to provide legal service and legal counsel to the most vulnerable of the citizens of this community. Primarily, not exclusively, but primarily refugees and women and their children of color. And Sandy provided services that no one else was providing. And it wasn't too many months ago when Sandy would say to me, Peter, what the F are we going to do? I'm not talking about Trump, she said. I'm talking about the need to continue these legal services. She said, I am old. I will soon be gone. Who is going to continue to provide these legal services that I have been attempting to do with very scarce resources? So I want to echo Sandy's spirit today, and by saying to all of you, the best way that we can honor her legacy is by listening to her when she says, God damn it, do something. So all of us need to honor Sandy Baird in the months, in the years ahead, very challenging times ahead of us, to find little ways. And I know many of you are activists in this room, but you need to do more. We all need to do more. So let us honor Sandy Baird by saying, Sandy, we love you, we honor you, respect you, and we will do the best that we can to continue the legacy that you committed your life to. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Peter. We appreciate your kind words. Next up, we're going to have Armina Medic and Jacob Borg come up. So Armina, if you would join us up here, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. So I met Sandy when I was attending Burlington College. I was immediately drawn to her knowledge, wisdom, drive, and a community engagement. She had many interactive classes that engaged all of the students who signed up. While observing us from the background, she watched over us like a caring mother. She devoted herself to delivering essential legal assistance to those who needed the most, ensuring that everyone had access to the justice they deserve. Sandy constantly encouraged critical thinking about both local and global politics. I will never forget a guest speaker, a former Iraqi veteran, who shared his experience and depicted the realities of civilian suffering during his time in Iraq. In my public speaking class, we had exciting opportunity to write an essay and give a presentation about someone who inspires us. I eagerly chose to share my admiration for Sandy, whose influence has truly motivated me. She gave a voice to those who felt their opinions didn't matter and engaged with those in the minority. She entrusted us with the torch to carry in her name, reminding us to speak up, organize, and educate whenever we see something wrong. Sandy touched the lives of many and inspired us all. It is our duty to carry on that torch in her name. Yes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yakuba Jacob Bogre, and I work with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont. With me today, we have a large contingent of ALV's employees. For us at ALV, Sandy was more than a colleague. She has been a mentor, a mother, but more than anything else, someone who has always worked hard to uplift everyone's life. You should not come to the office in the morning without reading the latest news in the world. If you've missed that, Sandy will tell you what is happening in the world. And that's how our day would start. Politics, sharing your opinion, we would disagree, but we'll move on and work looking after each other. Our offices are close by. Sandy would bust in, talk to you, share her views, leave. By the time she gets to her office, your phone will be ringing. Guess who is calling? Sandy. And please, if you don't pick up your phone, you will see her coming back. Or asking one of your colleagues if she or someone saw you in the hallway while she was in your office a few minutes ago. We came to know that Sandy's passion was not just being in the office, but making sure that we are all doing well. If you are late, if you are not in, Sandy will be the one calling you to ensure that you are coming to the office or you are doing well. But looking after those who are voiceless, looking after those who cannot raise their hand and say, this is what I'm missing, has always been powerful when you are around Sandy. She worked hard to empower every single man and woman who has been victimized in their own home countries. She would remind you that even if you don't have the resources, look around you. You will always be able to do something that would make a difference in someone's life. And that has always empowered all of us in the office. And sometimes we wanted to complain when she would come in and out, but when you don't see her around, you complain, or you start wondering, where is Sandy? Because something is missing in your daily life. And I remember 2 days after her passing, someone was banging at my door. And I was with my colleague that I said, oh, this is Sandy. And she said, what? And we all freaked out. When I walked in the hallway, I didn't see anyone. I said, is that true? Maybe Sandy is pranking us. But Nathan came and told me that, no, Sandy would have done that without waiting for you to open, she would move on and go look for you somewhere else. But for all of us here today, I think one thing we've learned from Sandy's life is her ethics. She worked hard. She would not rest. Even late at night, she would call and inquire about a case she's working on. She would continue to push hard to make sure that truth prevails. She worked hard to make sure that single parents who have been victims of domestic violence, who are suffering to raise their kids alone, get the little needs they have to get to raise their family. And not only coming to her office, you will learn something, but she would always remind you that you can do something with your lives. You can do something to empower your kids. You should show them the right path so they can also become productive citizens. For that, Sandy invested resources as getting tutors that were working to teach English to some of the women she was working with. From defending them, she moved up to empower them to learn to just the basic things. Write your name, ask a question, go to this office, ask this, ask that. And many are here today. They were victimizing their lives, but having someone like Sandy standing with them they were able to make ends meet. They were able to flee their violent situation and now are also taking care of their own lives. And I think, as Peter said, this type of legal service is not easy to find in Vermont. But we hope that many folks would step in Sandy's toes to help those who don't have a voice, to empower them, to make sure that they can also give back to their community and raise healthy families. So I want to thank all of you. Some of you, we've met you many times. Sandy would introduce you sometime in a week more than 5 times. But we always make sure that we try to remember your name. And if you are around, always stop by the office. We miss seeing you. So hopefully we'll continue to see you around. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacob and Armina. Also, sorry for butchering your last name, Jacob. Grandma would have corrected the hell out of me on that one. So, next up, we have Robin Lloyd and Armando Villaseca. I really hope I got that one right. Armando is also going to be reading a quick message from Joanne Mured, who could not make it with us, but she has a brief message to read. So, Robin, if you would come up.
Maybe I'll try to sit on that chair.
Yeah, you want to sit?
Yeah.
I can help to stand too if you want.
Wow, what a beautiful audience. I really miss Sandy's early morning calls. For some reason, in the last couple of years, she would give me a call. She would get up. She would put her pearls on. She would go to get her cup of coffee, and then she would give me a call. And I would tell her, look, you can't do it between 8 and 9 because I watch Democracy Now. You know, I have my patterns too, as us old girls. And so, but I don't know. Is there someone else here that she would call in the morning? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and it was always, she would say, how are you doing? But then she would let us know how she was doing and who she was angry at and what work she was trying to do, what good work she was doing. Sandy and I both taught at Burlington College, and we were on the board there. She was, as other people have said, a very enthusiastic teacher, a very good teacher. She wasn't focused on dates and so on, but she wanted to express the groundswell of history, the people's struggles through history, and to make them clearer, and to encourage people to become activists themselves. She and I taught a couple of courses together. One of the more fun ones was, oops, yeah, then everything goes away. See, I try to be modern, but it doesn't really work.
Where did you go?
Yeah. So we taught together. The fun course we taught was that she was going to do the history of war, and I would do the history of peacemaking. And so we taught that course together. The problem was, the interesting thing was this was at Burlington College, and war was going on right at Burlington College in terms of the staff and the teachers and so on. And of course, Burlington College had to close in, I think, 2016, but she kept going, and I think she was the primary force in keeping Vicky going, Vermont Institute of Community and Civic Involvement. And civic involvement. It was International was in it. That was the thing. Burlington College was first called Vicky, and that was without the international component. And I'm sure that it was Sandy that made that happen. The problem is I do have to read something because I want to quote her. Here we are, yeah. I think we bonded, especially on teaching a course on Haiti, because Doreen Kraft and I had made a little film about the Haitian Revolution, and she loved revolutions. I mean, you know, she was always talking about the American, the French, but it was the Haitian Revolution that she most loved to talk about. So I believe that's where we really bonded the most. I just want to close with some quotes from one of her last statements about Armistice Day, which she wrote just, I think, in the last few months. She says, on the 11th day of the 11th month of last year, Sandy recorded one of her last statements on CCTV, A Day in History, Armistice Day, which was declared after World War I in 1918. To the brave young men who believed and went to war in Somalia, Iraq, Leningrad, Guam, Korea, and Saigon, our hearts are with you, the forgotten heroes of forgotten wars. For those young men and women who will be called once again, may reason and conscience be with you. Make sure that your young lives are not wasted in the struggle for the empire of elites. And if your sacrifice must be made, let it be for the vow to truly end all wars and to rid the world of dominating systems and rulers which reap the profits of young people and lead nature to die. So, you know, I just think she had a wonderful way of expressing her concerns and her, concerns for the soldiers that were forced to go to war, but also the need for them to see that we need to work for peace together as well. So I really appreciate getting to know Sandy. Thank you.
Good evening. We're all here to honor Sandy, and as I've talked to several people, they said it's a very sad day, but a very happy day. Because look at how many people are here to celebrate her life. So I'm going to be short on my end, but I have a little something to read from Joanne Murad. Joanne is a member of our community, our CAFS board, and longtime friend of Sandy, so I'd like to read that. And there's an interesting, I just learned something from this letter grant about her cousin. And I hope folks can hear me in the back, so I'll try to talk in a principal voice. I can do that. All right. Okay. You want me to sing a couple of words too? I can. Guantanamera. Sandy and Grant were warmly welcomed Tim and I to UVM in 1971. I've always been impressed with their and her continued work towards good causes. But let's fast forward decades later, when I retired from teaching at UVM, and Sandy gave me a gift of an amazing, if I get too close you get the background noise, that's the problem. So I can either drive you crazy or you can hear me. In 2009, she dragooned me into a rewarding career as the resident director of Burlington College's semester program in Havana. A fruit of her passion for Cuba and its people that has lasted well into the demise of Burlington College in 2016. That first semester in Havana, it was Sandy who connected me with my family there. Sandy and Grant were witness to a magical moment when the director of the Center for Studies of the United States at the University of Havana was invited by Sandy to do a presentation. It turned out that he was a relative of mine, and a moment later, it turned into a treasured lifetime of family reunions. Sandy's commitment to Cuba and its people continued with her Cuban-American Friendship Society. As a member of the board, we traveled to Cuba frequently, and I regularly was on the phone with her about things regarding Cuba right up until her death. Her interest in Cuba never waned, and I will miss her frequent messages, which simply said, "Call me." That was part of mine as well. So any of you who have had phone conversations with Sandy, you know that you hang up, and probably within a minute, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, you get another call. I know Jared never received these phone calls, and neither of you, but that was one of the things that was a nice thing about Sandy. I did a bunch of notes, but I'm just going to speak briefly about Sandy. Sandy started the Cuban-American Friendship Society probably over 3 decades ago with the goal of uniting U.S. citizens and Cubans in a common goal of getting along. Her goal throughout her entire work with Cuba was, how do we bring people together so that they can start breaking down these terrible barriers that our two governments have put together and start really interacting with Cuban people. Sandy had an incredible impact on the lives of many, many Cubans. One of the things that Sandy said with all of her lofty ideas of changing the world was, we can't change the world, but we can help individual people in a small way that'll improve their life, which is really what it was all about. Whether it was medical supplies, school supplies, she and CAFS personally responsible for basically the entire computer lab at a small elementary school that we've adopted and we visit on a regular basis. I look around here and I see dozens of people who have either traveled with me or with Sandy to Cuba and know exactly the type of work that she did in Cuba. Not only that, she was highly respected in Havana. There were 2 groups, and I think Peter Clavel was at one of them, where there was a conference on the embargo or the blockade, the Helms-Burton Act. And Sandy and Peter, and there were several other U.S. citizens there who were representing the U.S. as a balance to let the Cubans know that, yes, that may be our government's position, but that's not necessarily our position. She was recognized by that organization at the University of Havana and was very proud of the work that she had done. Recently, about 1.5 years ago, CIPS, the center that we work with in Cuba, the Center for Studies of Psychology and CIPS, Centro de Investigaciones Psicológicas y Sociológicas, psychology and anyway, it's a long term. They recognize Sandy for all the work that she has done. CAFS has been one of the main contributors to this organization, bringing groups. CAFS has probably brought several hundred U.S. citizens to Cuba to see firsthand what it's like in Cuba. And she has really helped with that quite a bit. And then there's some more fun things, like Cuba. She hated the technology in Cuba. She would go down there with a big case and then try to download 60 pages of documents in this Wi-Fi that had barely one bar. So of all the things that really frustrated Sandy, that was, and those of you who were with me in the last few trips with her, it was almost unbearable, her desire to get on, where she would walk 20 blocks to one of the hotel business centers to be able to get online and pay, 500 pesos for an hour, which is about $1.50. So Sandy really had a commitment to Cuba. She personally has done more for Cuba than most people that I know. She brought us there. She brought many of us there. Showed us what a wonderful country that is and how things could really be. I'm sure there are things in this note that I had, but I can't read. It's too dark. Plus, nobody wants to hear that stuff. You want to hear from the heart. And Sandy really was. She was a good friend. I love Sandy. I miss her. I happen to have been in Cuba when she passed, and it was ironic, because she was supposed to have been, I know there's some people here, she was supposed to have been in Cuba the week before, but wasn't feeling well, decided not to go. So even into her last weeks, Cuba was on her mind, amongst all the other wonderful things. I'm not going to get into all the other wonderful things that she did, but with Cuba, she had a direct impact, real impact on people's lives and made their lives better. So for that, we can all be very proud and happy for Sandy's work, and we miss her very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin and Armando. So to wrap it up here, we have two speakers left, John Dooley, and then Susan Fowler is going to close us out. So John, if you would like to come up.
Thank you. It is obviously challenging to try to summarize about a life in 3 to 5 minutes, particularly when you're 11th in a hot room. It is, we've been here a while, and so I understand the need for brevity. I did 2 things to prepare for this. One is I read all the obituaries of Sandy that came out, and the most interesting thing about them was, good or bad, every one had a fact that I didn't learn from any of the others. It is really dramatic proof of what a complex person she was. But the second that I recommend, all right, I'm afraid I don't, all right, for everyone, is what I did just before I came here. I listened to a Cuban Latin jazz CD. And to think of Sandy in a positive way and try to be positive about a situation, of course, that hurts. Cuban jazz is just terrific. And I recommend everybody doing that. I'm only going to talk about 2 things in life. The beginning, when I first knew her, and the end, when I last knew her. So the beginning goes back to when she came to Vermont Legal Aid wanting to become a lawyer. I was then the director of Vermont Legal Aid, and she wanted to enter the 4-year clerkship program in which you worked in the law in that time, and then were allowed to take the bar exam. If people think that's easy, it obviously was done by people because they didn't have the very large amount of money they needed to go to law school. This was before there was really an active law school in Vermont. And it was, we are now the only state in the country that allows this. And it's gotten actually much tougher because we give a national bar exam that's all about what you learned in law school. But of course, if you never went to law school, it's pretty hard decide to have an exam about it to do. But there were really two goals of the clerkship program. One was become a lawyer without having to go through law school and being able to afford what it takes in the educational side to do that, and actually maybe make some amount of money, although probably not a lot, and learn about Vermont law. But the hidden one is the one for which I think Sandy is a role model. In general, as a director of Vermont Legal Aid for many years, I'll tell you that people who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting a legal education aren't going to stay a long time representing poor people. That's the reality of how the legal system works at this point. So here is an opportunity to get people into the legal delivery system who live that life, and talk to people and want to give legal representation to people who have personal kinds of problems. We're not talking about businesses, we're not talking about large injuries or that sort of thing. We're talking about things like domestic relations, abuse, and divorce. And Sandy is the role model for exactly that purpose. She went through that 4-year clerkship in order to practice law in that way, and through her entire life, that's what she did. She did exactly, it met, and of course this is the greatest need in the legal system today. Even though there are Vermont legal aids and some opportunities to get legal services in the state for poor people, they're way underfunded. And we need a cadre of Sandy Bairds, so people who need legal services for personal, individual kind of problems do it, and this is a way we provide them, is through this program. And she's the role model. I mean, her entire career was exactly why she started in being a lawyer. Now let me go to the more recent. Up and down to the period of Sandy's life, I most often met her right here, because it was a Caroline Fund annual meeting, and Sandy, my wife, who's here, and I are members of the Caroline Fund, and we would come and I'd catch up with Sandy and go through it. But in the last 6 months, I've had a very intense interaction with Sandy that I hadn't had for many, 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 many years. She took on a case with the help of AALV, who you now know from Jacob, is the Association of Americans living in, Africans living in Vermont. Obviously, Americans live here. And it involved getting some money as a result of a workers' compensation awards to some children in Africa. Now, this is the summation of Sandy's life. Where are we talking about? We're talking about Burundi. What's Burundi? The country in the world with the lowest incomes. It's the most poverty-stricken country on the planet. We're talking about getting money for basic living and more to 2 children of 7 and 8 years old now. And they live in a refugee camp. The family came from Congo, close, which abuts, and into Burundi because Burundi was safer, although Burundi is not safe. It's a difficult situation to do. And because this workers' compensation award occurred in Vermont, the judge decided that they needed some kind of financial guardian for this purpose, and she turned to me and said, "Can you be the financial guardian to take the workers' comp money and figure out how to get it to the children from what it is?" And of course, you don't say no to Sandy for this, particularly not in this case. I will tell you, this case was very complex. I think Jeff Quitner described it. It is a real fighting match among the people who could get the money. Made more complex by the fact the lawyers didn't get along at all. which is very sad for the legal system going through it. But Sandy did a terrific job. She first got the kids money to go to school. They had never been to school in it, so that was the first step in getting money from it to do. And then she won in the probate court as to getting them as much of the money for workers' comp money for the kids as she could. Unfortunately, it's now an appeal, so that her life did not end at this time that she had won. But I think in the end it will come out the way that she wanted to do it. So imagine all the things she did in her life, and you come to this point in your 80s, something that I have tried to live with. You come to 80s, and you get the opportunity to do this. You get to make a life for young African kids who've had nothing, living in the most poverty-stricken place in the world, starting with getting them in school, and then getting them some money to create a life. And she wanted, of course, that they might come to the United States as a result of all of that. So this is, of course, for all of us, a very sad occasion that her life has ended. For me, it's a combination. The combination is I got to work with Sandy for 6 months. That was a wonderful thing. Yes, I smile every time somebody talks about that you got a call from her when in the middle of the night, in the morning, but more often 5 minutes after the one you just had with her. I went through all of that, but to see that level of passion and energy at her life and how she did this work that was so important to her was really so important to me. So that's how I end in a kind of mixed feeling about this occasion. Thank you for the time.
So I'm the closer, so I'm just going to make it 5 seconds long. My name's Sue Fowler. I'm if I'm not a gambler, but if I were a gambler, I would have gambled. It would be Sandy speaking at my memorial service and not the other way around, because she was such an incredible force of nature. And doesn't it feel as though Burlington has lost its Pope Francis? I mean, nobody cared more than Sandy cared. And anyway, I met Sandy in 1981 when I was a freshly minted prosecutor, and she was a defense attorney. And we became friends over the absurdities of life, and her starting every conversation with, "What are we going to do with this poor bastard?" And then eventually we came up with some agreement that worked, let him go free, why not? Whatever she said. But anyway, we became friends, and we stayed friends for 44 years. And then after I left the state's attorney's office, I went into private practice, and people would come to me who had no money, they had complex problems, but no money. And sometimes I took them, but more often than not, I gave them to Sandy. And she always took them. And then, 10 years in, some rich people came in one day, and I listened to their issue. I don't remember what it was. And I thought, this could be for Sandy. So I sent them off to Sandy. And a few days later, I got a call from her saying, "Susan, why did you send me those rich people?" And I said, "Well, Sandy, I've sent you so many people that had no money, and this is a way you can get paid." There's a long pause. She says, "Thank you very much. I appreciate it. These are not my people." And all the years I knew her, that's the only referral I made to her that she declined to take. She took them all. I don't know where she is now, but wherever she is, I hope my life is good enough that I can be with her again someday.
Thank you for everybody that spoke, and thank you all for coming here. I just have a couple things to say. Me and my grandma might have not gotten along the best, but that's because we both shared the same opinions. We just got at it 2 different ways. I was a little bit more direct, where she kind of beat around the bush and tried to save everybody, but we always had the same opinions in the end. So a lot of my phone calls with her might have been arguments and whatnot, but we still did share a lot of good and positive times together and laughs, because she did make me laugh when she'd call me freaking out about the most minimalistic thing. And it's like, Grandma, just calm down, take a deep breath. Or if one of my friends was parked in the driveway and she'd come home, lay on that damn horn, fucking, gotta move. I'm like, Grandma, they still gotta put their shoes on, hang out. So she did make me laugh, and then we did kind of get into enough arguments, but I still loved her to the end, and I will always think about anything that she ever taught me and or told me to think about to try and make me smarter and or a better person and or care for just everybody, which is what she always did. So I thank you all for being here and caring. And this is to Sandy. Now Terry is going to end us out with 2 songs that she personally requested at her celebration or funeral.
Tell us why you're wearing that suit.
Oh, well, Grandma did love black and gold, so in memory of her, the suit is for her. Thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. And Terry's going to end us out with a couple of songs on the bagpipe. So.